Hi, I'm Mina.
And I'm Yules.
Thanks for tuning in to Artificially Informed.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. This is where we take the vast, chaotic churn of global information, the seismic financial shifts, the high-stakes geopolitical maneuvers, and the deepest mysteries of science, and we try to filter it all down.
Right, into the precise critical knowledge you actually need to be, truly well-informed.
And today, we have a truly fascinating stack of material. It spans from the quantum realm, where matter is burning hotter than the core of the sun, all the way to the global balance sheet.
Which is, of course, being driven by data and artificial intelligence. Our mission, as always, isn't just to report the facts. It's to connect these seemingly disparate dots.
Exactly. To give you the critical insight into the underlying forces that are shaping the planet right now.
Today, we're linking microscopic physics, the kind that redefines thermodynamics, to the massive financial forces driving this AI boom.
And the staggering energy demands that come with it. That's a huge piece of this. We're also tracking the delicate dance of climate diplomacy happening right now in the Amazon rainforest.
And we'll be dissecting some highly controversial peace plan proposals that, well, they have the potential to fundamentally reshape Eastern Europe's political landscape.
It's a deep dive into complexity, resource allocation, and, I guess, cognitive limits.
For sure. Specifically, we'll be analyzing the financial reverberations of NVIDIA's absolutely explosive earnings report, and really digging into why that one number meant so much to the entire market.
We'll also explore the bizarre biological sophistication of the sea urchins. What are they calling it? An all-body brain.
An all-body brain, yeah. And we'll examine the internal resistance facing the COP30 climate summit in Brazil, alongside that highly contentious U.S.-Russia peace plan for Ukraine.
Let's not waste any time. We are diving straight into the economy of speed.
Let's do it.
Okay, so segment 1, the AI and tech economy roller coaster. You simply cannot talk about global finance or technology today without talking about NVIDIA.
No, it's impossible. Their recent third-quarter performance was, to use a technical term, absolutely astronomical.
Ah, right. But it was more than just a big number, wasn't it?
Oh, much more. It was market stabilizing. NVIDIA's profits surged by a staggering 65%, reaching $31.9 billion for the quarter.
And that dollar amount is only half the story. What's so fascinating here is why this one company's performance immediately calmed the entire market, especially the tech sector.
Well, you have to remember the mood on Wall Street leading up to this. There was genuine nervousness.
The bubble talk.
Exactly, the bubble talk. People were seriously wondering if the AI surge we've witnessed was a truly sustainable technological boom, or if we were just watching a speculative bubble inflate, like the dot-com era all over again.
So NVIDIA's numbers, and I think critically, their forward guidance eased those concerns.
That guidance, their forecast for future performance, is seen as the absolute key indicator for the health of the entire AI industry. It's the canary in the coal mine.
And the specific metrics that mattered weren't just the overall profit, right? It was the breakdown.
Precisely. A huge chunk of that revenue came from their data center segment. That confirmed that major cloud providers and big corporations are committed to spending billions on this new computing infrastructure for the long haul.
So it's not just hype, it's real investment in hardware.
It's real, sustained investment. When NVIDIA succeeds in that area, it provides confidence across the board. It influences the trajectory of the entire Magnificent Seven cohort of tech stocks.
But the atmosphere wasn't purely celebratory. I mean, there were signs of lingering caution in the system.
You're right. While the NASDAQ, which is heavily weighted toward tech, was up significantly, we saw these concurrent fluctuations in the Dow Jones Industrial Average.
Which is a much better proxy for the broader industrial economy.
Right. And at the same time, we noted a major sell-off happening in the highly volatile cryptocurrency market.
So what's the signal there? What is the market telling us?
The signal was mixed. It's saying that the core technological infrastructure is soaring, but the broader financial world is still kind of holding its breath about overall economic stability.
And that caution, I imagine, is profoundly magnified when we look at the global AI race.
Especially the intense competition between the United States and China. NVIDIA's success just highlights this massive computational resource gap that exists right now.
A gap that's largely driven by U.S. policy.
Very much so. And a case in point is Google DeepMind's new model, Gemini 3 Pro.
Yeah, tell us about that.
It was recently rated the best on Artificial Analysis's Intelligence Index. It officially surpassed OpenAI's GPT 5.1.
And this isn't just, bragging rights. This indicates a superior capability in really complex reasoning, in coding, and in what they call multimodal understanding.
And this news, as you can imagine, sent Chinese AI startups scrambling.
I bet.
Executives from these firms are openly expressing deep concern about falling behind the Western lead. They're citing Google's robust advantages in several key areas.
Like what?
Computational resources, first and foremost, but also access to diverse, high-quality foundational data models, and crucially, this vast integrated cloud services infrastructure that Google has.
And this is where policy intersects with physics and finance. The core issue for the Chinese firms is the sheer exorbitant cost of computation.
Especially when they're facing export controls. The U.S. government actively restricts the sale of its most advanced graphical processing units. We're talking about things like the NVIDIA H100 and A100 chips to any Chinese entities.
And you need those chips to build these models.
You need warehouses full of them. Training and running these trillion-parameter models requires a literal city of these high-end chips. For Chinese firms, the inability to access the cutting edge means they have to rely on less efficient, older chips.
Or try to develop their own, which is incredibly expensive and time-consuming.
Exactly. The infrastructure costs are just a massive hurdle for them to clear right now. It slows their ability to scale. The ability to source or produce these high-end semiconductors is really going to define China's technological competitiveness for the next decade.
This, I think, leads us directly, if a bit uncomfortably, to the dark side of that massive computational need.
Topic B, the environmental and regulatory cost of AI.
This boom isn't just taxing on budgets, it's taxing the entire electrical grid.
Precisely. The North American Electric Reliability Corporation, or NERC, they're the ones who monitor the grid, issued a really stark warning recently.
What did they say?
They said the soaring electricity demand from all these new data centers is risking widespread blackouts.
Wow.
Particularly during severe weather events, like a cold winter storm, when demand is already at its peak.
And we need to understand the scale here, because I think it's easy to just dismiss this as a marginal increase.
It's not marginal at all.
Take Northern Virginia, which is a global hub for data centers. Those facilities, collectively, consume over 1,500 megawatts of power.
Which, to put that in perspective for you, is equivalent to the entire power usage of the city of Boston, Massachusetts.
The entire city, just for data centers in one part of Virginia.
And the technical reason for the strain is critical. It's not just that they use a lot of power. They use it constantly, 247, year-round, at an incredibly high density.
So it's a constant heavy load.
A massive constant load. And this requires huge, immediate upgrades to transformers and transmission lines that the utility companies are just struggling to implement fast enough.
So any extra strain on the grid, like a severe cold snap or a power plant failure, could be catastrophic.
It could immediately lead to cascading failures and widespread blackouts across a region that hosts not just data, but, critical infrastructure.
Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, the regulatory environment is reacting to this rapid tech growth, but it sounds like not without some considerable tension.
Yeah, the European Union, the EU, is facing some serious backlash over proposed amendments to its data protection regulations.
And delays in its AI legislation.
Right. It's a textbook example of the innovation versus safety divide.
Hmm.
You have rights groups on one side arguing that rolling back protections fundamentally undermines civil liberties.
And the principles of the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, which has been the global gold standard for years.
It has. They fear that in the pursuit of innovation, the safety and privacy of EU citizens will be compromised by poorly regulated AI systems.
But Brussels is defending the move.
Of course, they're claiming these amendments are absolutely essential to enhance innovation and competitiveness across the bloc. They argue that the existing GDPR rules might be too rigid or too slow for the blistering pace of AI development.
So it's a high-stakes balancing act. Do you prioritize foundational digital rights, or do you prioritize economic growth in a very competitive space?
That's the billion-euro question. And speaking of economic maneuvering, we should connect this back to how companies are using AI, not just for creation, but for cost mitigation.
Especially in the U.S. manufacturing sector, which has been dealing with some major trade headwinds.
Right, which brings us to this startup, Cavella. They recently secured about $6.6 million in funding, specifically to help manufacturers combat soaring costs.
And the timing is crucial, given the shifts in U.S. trade policy.
The context here is the profound increase in U.S. tariffs on imports. We saw tariffs jump from an average of about 2.5% to an estimated 27% by April during the second Trump administration.
That is an enormous financial obstacle. It profoundly impacts pricing for any company that relies on overseas supply chains.
And this is where Cavella comes in. Their AI claims it can reduce overall manufacturing costs by a staggering 35%.
35%, that's a huge efficiency gain.
It is. It helps companies navigate that huge 27% tariff factor. It could either help them optimize their existing supply chains, or it could make domestic localized production suddenly more financially viable.
So the broader implication is that this kind of technology could actually accelerate a shift toward more domestic manufacturing, using AI efficiency to offset international trade impacts.
Exactly. It's an AI solution to a political and economic problem.
Shifting gears slightly within the digital realm, let's look at content and user experience. Spotify just made a very interesting acquisition.
Yeah, this one caught my eye. They acquired Who Sampled,
which is a popular music database known for meticulously tracking samples, covers, remixes, all the connections between songs.
It's a brilliant strategic move to enrich their new Song DNA feature.
So what will that do exactly?
Well, Song DNA will presumably allow users to dive much deeper into the intellectual property heritage of the music they listen to. You can see which song sampled what, which band covered which classic.
It turns listening into more of an educational experience. You can trace the lineage of musical ideas.
And importantly, it helps track the complex IP rights associated with all those musical connections. It's a data play at its core.
And while Spotify is expanding discovery, Meta Platforms is busy restricting access in one region.
Right, in Australia. In compliance with new legislation there aimed at protecting minors, Meta decided to remove Australian users under the age of 16 from both Instagram and Facebook.
And that started December 4th, 2023.
The new Australian law imposes hefty fines on social media companies that fail to comply with age verification, which explains Meta's proactive move. But the pushback is pretty complex.
Yeah, critics, including youth advocacy groups, are raising some valid concern about the cost of this protection.
They argue that restricting access for teenagers, and we're talking about hundreds of thousands of users in the 13 to 15 age range, it limits their access to vital information, to news, to political discourse, especially in times of crisis.
And then there are the privacy risks. Mandatory age verification often requires users to share even more sensitive personal data, like government IDs or biometric information, just to prove they aren't a child.
It's a classic, agonizing trade-off: protection versus access and privacy risk.
That tension between protecting vulnerable populations and dealing with the immense resource and regulatory burden of modern technology, that's a recurring theme today.
It is, and it brings us beautifully into our next segment, connecting the efficiency of biology with the extreme limits of physics.
Segment 2, Mars, microengines, and the future of data. We are starting with a physics breakthrough so extreme it challenges our fundamental understanding of heat and efficiency.
Yeah, this is wild. Topic A is about the absolute limits of heat and thermodynamics. Researchers at King's College London have constructed a single particle engine.
A single particle engine. Just think about that. It's a microscopic engine made of just one levitated silica particle.
About 100 nanometers wide. It's almost impossible to conceive of.
And this tiny engine manages to reach temperatures hotter than the core of the sun.
They apply these fluctuating electric fields to generate what they call synthetic thermal conditions, and it elevates the particle's temperature to around 10 million kelvins.
How does physics even allow for that kind of absurd, localized energy concentration?
This is where it gets really interesting, and it's a major scientific insight. The experiment is significant precisely because it forces us to reconsider the rules. It challenges the traditional understanding based on Carnot's principles, which govern our macroscopic, everyday heat engines.
So at this incredibly small scale, the engine is operating in a regime where quantum effects and fluctuation effects become dominant. So we're talking about the famous second law of thermodynamics, which dictates the maximum efficiency of any heat engine. Does this experiment suggest that the second law can be broken at the quantum level?
Not broken so much as redefined. Because the system is so incredibly small, random fluctuations, that we would normally call noise, can actually be leveraged as a resource.
So you're turning noise into work?
In a way, yes. The engine's efficiency isn't just defined by temperature differences, but also by the rate of information input. The fluctuation theorem suggests that its efficiency can momentarily exceed the traditional Carnot limit.
Not by breaking physics, but by operating in this different, highly unstable regime.
Correct. This fundamentally changes how scientists think about harnessing energy at the smallest possible scales.
From manipulating single particles to storing our entire digital civilization inside a single molecule. Topic B is revolutionary data storage using DNA.
Deoxyribonucleic acid. It's a fascinating transition. As we just discussed, the AI boom is straining our power grids and our silicon storage capacity. Scientists are now seriously proposing using DNA to solve this looming global data crisis.
The potential density is just staggering. It absolutely dwarfs silicon.
It really does. 1 single gram of DNA can theoretically store 215 petabytes of data.
Okay, break that down for us. What is 215 petabytes?
It's 215 million gigabytes. To put that in perspective for you, that's equivalent to storing all the data generated globally in an entire year in just a few pounds of material.
That's insane. And beyond the density, the durability is key.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
DNA, if it's synthesized and stored correctly, usually cold and dry, can remain stable and readable for millennia.
Far surpassing magnetic tapes, hard drives, flash memory, all of which decay or suffer from technological obsolescence within a few decades.
It makes it an ideal archival solution for humanity's history.
So how does this actually work? How do you write data onto a DNA strand?
Well, the basic process involves converting binary data, the sequences of zeros and ones we're all familiar with, into the 4 nucleotide bases that make up DNA, A, T, C, and G.
Adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine.
Right. Then, they use chemical synthesis processes to create actual DNA strands that encode that data.
So what are the barriers? Why aren't we doing this already?
The current barriers are immense. The process is incredibly expensive, it's laborious, and it's very complex, particularly synthesizing very long, error-free DNA strands.
And then reading it back, I imagine.
And then reading or decoding those strands reliably. Right now, it's not viable for, your everyday active data storage, but the long-term implications are vast, not just for archival purposes, but for potentially massively reducing the physical footprint and the energy consumption of data centers globally.
Speaking of large data centers, let's leave Earth for a bit and head out to space for Topic C cosmic sightings and space missions.
NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, has been keenly observing an interstellar comet called 3I Atlas.
This comet is special because it's interstellar, meaning it originated from outside our solar system.
It was discovered in 2019, and it recently brightened significantly after its closest pass by the Sun. It allowed astronomers like Gianluca Mossi to capture these stunning images of its glowing tail as it races away from the Sun and back into deep space.
And NASA got multiple integrated eyes on it. They used the MAVEN mission.
MAVEN, which stands for Mars Atmosphere and Volatile Evolution. It utilized its imaging ultraviolet spectrograph.
Which is interesting because MAVEN's primary job is studying the Martian atmosphere.
But the versatility of these instruments is key. By using the UV spectrograph, AVEN gathered unique data on the chemical makeup of the comet's coma. That's the cloud of gas and dust surrounding the nucleus.
And UV light is good for detecting what exactly?
It's excellent for detecting volatile molecules like water vapor, carbon monoxide, and various hydrocarbons. Analyzing this coma tells us about the pristine, deep space environment where the comet formed.
So it's giving us clues about material composition from outside the Sun's influence.
Precisely. Even the Perseverance Mars rover got a view, capturing it as just a faint smudge on October 4, 2025.
And that comet is headed our way, relatively speaking.
It is. Its closest approach to Earth is expected on December 19, 2025.
And right there on Mars, Perseverance is continuing its primary work, analyzing the planet's geology, and they found a real geological head-scratcher.
They did. They discovered a uniquely sculpted rock using remote sensing instruments like the supercamp. The strange thing is, the rock is composed of elements that are typically found deep within Earth's core.
Not usually accessible on the surface without, immense volcanic upwelling.
Right. So this finding immediately raises some deep questions about Mars's geological history.
It's an alien rock, but it resembles terrestrial formations made of core elements. Does that suggest Mars once had a much more vigorous, Earth-like cycle of volcanism?
It absolutely fuels that debate. Or perhaps that its early magnetic field, which would be powered by a dynamic core, was active much later than we previously thought.
Finding these core elements on the surface suggests some process, maybe massive ancient impacts or some kind of localized, intense volcanism that brought that material up.
Exactly. The analysis of this one single rock contributes massively to our understanding of the red planet's complex and still largely mysterious interior structure and history.
From the core of Mars, we shift back to biology with Topic D intelligence and biomimicry. Prepare yourself because we are apparently completely rewriting the book on sea urchins.
Yes. Researchers at the California Institute of Technology, Caltech, have made a remarkable shift in our understanding of marine biology.
They're saying the sea urchin, specifically Strongylocentrotus purpuratus, doesn't have a centralized brain.
Instead, it has a decentralized nervous system where the entire body acts as an all-body brain.
I love that concept, an all-body brain. So these creatures, which are echinoderms like starfish and sea cucumbers, they use these widely distributed neurons throughout their bodies to coordinate incredibly complex behaviors.
Behaviors like foraging for food, righting themselves after being flipped over, and evading predators, all without a central processing unit, so to speak.
The significance of this goes far beyond just marine biology, right?
Oh, way beyond. It pushes the boundaries of what we even consider complex cognition in non-human organisms. And it directly informs fields like robotics and artificial intelligence.
Oh, so?
By inspiring the design of resilient, adaptive, decentralized systems. If you can distribute processing power throughout a robotic body, there's no single point of failure. You're mimicking nature's efficiency.
And speaking of surprising insect cognition, bumblebees can learn patterns similar to Morse code. This seems almost unbelievable.
It's a major finding from Queen Mary University of London. Studies show that bumblebees can learn and discern light patterns, specifically long and short flashes, and accurately associate them with a reward.
Which demonstrates a sophisticated level of temporal processing and memory that just defies traditional assumptions about the cognitive limits of small-brained insects.
It really challenges the idea that intelligence and complex learning are solely tied to massive brain size.
If a tiny brain can process temporal patterns like Morse code, it suggests that nature has evolved these incredibly efficient, nuanced learning mechanisms.
And just like the sea urchin, this research has profound implications for machine learning. It could help us design AI algorithms that mimic these natural, highly adaptive, and resource-efficient learning processes.
It's all about optimizing efficiency in all forms of information processing.
It's incredible to connect the sheer efficiency of life, from the quantum scale of that microengine all the way to insect cognition. And now we move from the elegance of science to the complexity and, well, the often brutal reality of geopolitics.
Segment 3. The geopolitical flashpoints, war, and diplomacy. And the biggest, most sensitive story dominating this section is the controversial U.S.-Russia peace plan that's reportedly being floated for Ukraine.
This is explosive news. Reports, including those from Axios and the Financial Times, indicate that a 28-point framework has been developed in consultation with Moscow.
And presented to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky by U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff.
The core of this plan, from what we're hearing, demands massive, sovereignty-altering concessions from Kyiv.
Let's detail those reported concessions because they are substantial. The plan allegedly includes Ukraine relinquishing territory it currently controls in the Donbass region,
Having its military forces.
recognizing Russian as an official state language,
And, crucially, adopting permanent neutrality and full demilitarization.
This proposal is immediately fraught with controversy because, as many analysts are pointing out, it fundamentally undermines Ukraine's sovereignty.
And it requires substantial territorial compromise, essentially accepting the current battlefield realities under duress. The major question is, why would the U.S. float a plan that requires such concessions now?
The answer seems to lie in connecting the dots to the context we're about to discuss. Funding fatigue.
The diplomatic pressure is clearly intensifying because of the financial strain on allies and, of course, the approaching U.S. election cycle, which creates an urgency to stabilize the conflict before a potential political shift.
So this plan reads like a highly negotiated attempt to create an off-ramp for the conflict.
Even if the price for Kyiv is extremely high, and the international reaction is, as you'd expect, cautious and skeptical.
European leaders are publicly emphasizing the absolute necessity of Ukraine's direct involvement in crafting any sustainable resolution.
Right. There's a significant doubt about whether this framework, as it's being reported, could lead to a peaceful and acceptable outcome for Kyiv, or whether it just formalizes Russian gains on the ground.
And it's worth noting that U.S. military officials are currently in Kyiv amid these discussions.
This suggests a very high-level U.S. commitment to navigating this extremely tense diplomatic moment.
And this entire situation is clearly exacerbated by Topic B, funding fatigue and regional burden. We are hearing loud, explicit complaints from European allies about the financial strain.
In the distribution of aid, Sweden's foreign minister, Maria Malmer Stenergaard, voiced some serious frustration. She described the current situation as not fair and not sustainable.
What's her specific complaint?
She's pointing out that the Nordic and Baltic nations are disproportionately shouldering the financial support burden for Ukraine relative to their GDP.
And that distinction relative to GDP is the key complaint here.
It is. You have smaller economies in the region with a combined population under 30 million who are often expected to provide a substantial percentage of the total NATO military aid to Ukraine.
So Stendergaard is arguing that smaller economies can't sustainably continue to contribute significantly more than larger, wealthier European members.
Which is fueling this internal EU debate on future funding mechanisms and defense spending.
And the political pushback from within the EU is fierce. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán has publicly called for the EU to cease funding the war entirely.
Yeah, his language was very strong. He labeled the financial support as buttressing a corrupt war mafia in Kyiv, specifically referencing previous corruption scandals.
And Orbán warned that the proposed 135 billion fund plan would impose significant and, in his view, unnecessary debt on future European generations.
He views these joint European loans as fiscally irresponsible and advocates for prioritizing direct diplomacy with Moscow instead of prolonging the conflict through financial commitments he sees as detrimental to the EU economy.
Moving to topic C, military tensions are clearly rising beyond the borders of Ukraine, creating some dangerous friction points across Europe.
We had a very serious incident involving a Russian spy ship that entered United Kingdom waters.
Reports indicate the Russian spy ship engaged in overtly hostile behavior, specifically aiming lasers at RAF, or Royal Air Force, pilots who are conducting surveillance.
The UK views this as aggressively hostile and a direct threat to their national security. In response, British officials are actively considering military options to counter what they perceive as a direct threat.
Which is obviously escalating the tensions in the North Atlantic.
At the same time, the EU is fast-tracking its defense integration with plans for a military Schengen,
which is directly aimed at increasing reaction speed against potential Russian aggression.
The EU Commission is working on establishing this unified military mobility area by 2027. The goal is to allow the rapid, frictionless movement of troops and heavy equipment across member states.
Because right now, due to varying national regulations and infrastructure issues, it could take a long time to move forces.
A very long time. Up to 45 days for heavy forces to reach the Russian border.
And the military Schengen plan aims to drastically reduce that deployment time to as little as 3 days.
Which is a massive strategic advantage. Predictably, Russia has criticized this as a hostile NATO buildup, viewing it as a provocative measure that forces the militarization of the EU economy.
And then there's the truly bizarre and alarming claim from the Federal Security Service, the FSB, in Russia.
Yeah, an assassination plot that sounds like it was ripped from a spy novel, but updated for the AI age.
What's the claim?
The FSB claims they thwarted a Ukrainian plot to assassinate a senior Russian military officer using contaminated beer laced with a VX nerve agent variant.
But the alleged delivery mechanism is what really stands out here.
It is. The operation was reportedly facilitated through a sophisticated AI-generated online persona named Polina, who had apparently built trust with the officer over months through digital correspondence.
If that's true, it highlights a very dark evolution of espionage tactics in the digital era. Using sophisticated AI to generate deep cover personas for physical acts of aggression is a terrifying leap in capability.
Shifting our focus to topic D, let's look at conflicts in the Middle East and Africa. Israeli military strikes have intensified in Gaza,
targeting refugee camps, resulting in dozens of civilian casualties, and also in southern Lebanon, where 13 casualties were reported following a strike in the city of Sidon.
And amid these hostilities, we saw a very significant diplomatic stance from the United States. U.S. Ambassador Mike Huckabee publicly labeled violent incidents instigated by Israeli extremists in the West Bank as terrorism.
That is a critical signal. It's very rare for the U.S. to use the term terrorism to describe actions by Israeli extremists.
It underscores the severity of the violence and the need for immediate, decisive restraint from all sides in the West Bank to prevent further escalation and chaos in the region.
Meanwhile, South Africa has refused to accept further charter flights transporting Palestinians from Gaza.
Their concern is a deeply ethical one. They fear these flights are part of a larger, coordinated strategy to evacuate Palestinians against their will, potentially undermining their autonomy and contributing to forced displacement.
And down in Africa, President Trump made a pledge during the U.S.-Saudi Investment Forum.
He expressed a commitment to collaborate with regional partners, specifically Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Egypt, to end the atrocities and humanitarian crisis in Sudan.
A crisis where famine and displacement are affecting millions. The situation there remains incredibly dire, characterized by internal conflict and systemic violence.
President Trump framed his administration's efforts as contributing to global peace and stability by focusing on mobilizing wealthy regional partners, underscoring the urgency of international diplomatic intervention to stabilize that profoundly troubled region.
Finally, Topic E covers international defense and nuclear security, with a serious concern regarding Iran's nuclear ambitions.
A report from the Financial Times revealed that Iranian nuclear experts conducted a second secret visit to Russia last year.
And the purpose was specifically to acquire sensitive laser technologies.
This immediately raises concerns because these technologies can be leveraged not just for civilian purposes, but potentially for highly efficient uranium enrichment.
Which is a crucial step toward nuclear weapons capability.
It increases regional instability and focuses international scrutiny on both Russia and Iran. At the same time, in the Indo-Pacific, the U.S. is strengthening its strategic partnership with India.
The U.S. approved a significant $93 million sale of advanced weaponry to India.
This arms package includes things like the FGM-148 Javelin anti-tank missiles, renowned for their ability to defeat armored vehicles, and Excalibur precision-guided artillery rounds.
This bolsters India's defense capabilities and underscores the U.S. commitment to supporting its ally amid rising regional security challenges, particularly as a counterweight to China.
And that brings us to segment 4, politics, justice, and accountability. This is a section dominated by high-profile legal sagas and global policy shifts.
And we begin with a very anticipated transparency move that has been politically charged from the very start.
Topic A, the Jeffrey Epstein files release. President Donald Trump has now signed the bill mandating the full disclosure of documents related to the late Jeffrey Epstein within 30 days.
This action has vast implications, moving way beyond political theater.
It does. Epstein's connections to powerful figures and the circumstances of his death in custody have long fueled public distrust and, frankly, rampant conspiracy theories regarding systemic cover-ups.
So this mandate aims to shed light on some of the unreported facets of Epstein's network and, crucially, hold high-profile figures accountable for the systemic failures that allowed his crimes to continue for so long.
But it's impossible to ignore the political motivation here. President Trump explicitly framed the bill's signing as a strategic political move.
He claimed Epstein was a lifelong Democrat and suggested the release would expose connections that would be damaging to his political opponents.
Right. But regardless of the intent, the outcome is a massive increase in public transparency.
And it's important to note the political dynamics within Congress. The bill passed overwhelmingly.
But Representative Clay Higgins was the lone dissenting vote against the mandated disclosure, a fact that has drawn significant attention.
Moving to topic B, challenging political prosecutions. The legal proceedings against former FBI Director James Comey are in serious jeopardy.
This really suggests that the line between political vendetta and legitimate justice is becoming increasingly blurry. A U.S. judge recently expressed significant skepticism regarding Comey's indictment.
An indictment that was raised by a prosecutor associated with President Trump's administration.
The judge's concerns centered on procedural irregularities. Specifically, that the indictment's final version was not presented to the entire grand jury before being filed.
And this is more than just a simple legal technicality. It raises fundamental questions about the validity and integrity of the charges themselves.
Comey's defense is contending that the entire process was politically biased, and they're directly citing President Trump's repeated public calls for indictments against his critics.
It highlights this intensely complicated entanglement between executive power, judicial mechanisms, and political animosity.
Simultaneously, in Argentina, we're seeing a parallel case involving a former leader facing legal jeopardy that reflects this global trend.
An Argentine court ordered the seizure of $500 million in assets, including 20 properties, linked to former center-left President Cristina Fernández de Kirchner.
This is following her conviction in the Vieladed corruption scandal.
And she maintains, much like others facing high-profile charges globally, that the legal actions against her are politically motivated acts of opposition designed to sideline her influence.
It just mirrors this pattern where political opponents often utilize judicial means, whether legitimately or for a vendetta, to challenge and remove power structures.
Let's shift to topic C, Germany, the UK, and migration policy shifts. In Germany, Interior Minister Alexander Dobrindt detailed his stringent immigration policy, describing his course as notably tough.
He's attributing a significant 60% decrease in initial asylum applications to stricter border controls that were implemented recently.
And he also mentioned these controversial plans for establishing return hubs in Africa to manage the repatriation of rejected asylum seekers.
The aim is to shorten that process dramatically. This policy stance is highly relevant in the context of the rise of the far-right alternative for Deutschland, or AfD party, which has gained popularity largely fueled by these migration debates.
And across the English Channel in the UK, Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood made an ethically contentious statement regarding settled status for migrants.
She asserted that becoming part of the UK is a privilege, not an inherent right, and she warned that some migrants may face a waiting period of up to 20 years for settled status.
That sparked immediate and intense ethical debates about the treatment of asylum seekers and economic migrants.
It did. The Albanian Prime Minister, for instance, publicly accused the Home Secretary of ethnic stereotyping against Albanians, which highlights the international scrutiny and public concern over these stringent immigration policies.
Moving to topic D, U.S.-China diplomatic and legal frictions. Tensions continue to escalate on both legal and military fronts.
And they're setting precedents that could reshape international law. The state of Missouri is taking an unprecedented legal step.
They're attempting to seize Chinese state assets to enforce a massive $24 billion judgment.
This ruling stems from accusations that China misled the world about the origins of the COVID-19 pandemic, and the financial verdict was delivered after China failed to respond in the court proceedings.
This is an enormous move. It reflects a growing tension over accountability for the pandemic and directly tests the boundaries of international law regarding asset seizure against a sovereign nation.
Meanwhile, the U.S. Senate approved the Taiwan Assurance Implementation Act.
This act aims to lift restrictions on official exchanges with Taiwan, which has historically been a major diplomatic red line for Beijing.
The move signals a deepening of the U.S.-Taiwan relationship and is expected to intensify military pressure from China, which, of course, views Taiwan as a breakaway province.
And the U.S. is concurrently reinforcing Taiwan's defense capabilities, including a newly awarded defense contract to Raytheon for air defense systems.
Finally, in Topic E, we see China reinforcing its central authority in Hong Kong. The head of the Chinese Academy of Sciences is set to lead a major seminar in Hong Kong.
And the goal is to disseminate the spirit of the recent fourth plenum of the Communist Party.
The goal here is alignment and control. This seminar is a mechanism to ensure that local development efforts in Hong Kong are fully aligned with national goals.
Particularly the framework set out for the forthcoming 15th five-year plan, which spans from 2026 to 2030.
It's all about integrating Hong Kong's economic and political trajectory smoothly into the central government's long-term vision.
And this political alignment leads us into our next major theme, the immense intertwined challenges of climate policy and global finance,
where the divisions are as deep as the rainforest itself.
Segment 5, Climate Conflicts and Global Financial Shifts. We start at the COP30 Climate Summit in Belém, Brazil, where significant internal divisions are threatening any strong, unified outcomes.
Topic A is all about the fight for adaptation and the massive push needed for a fossil fuel transition. Brazilian President Lula da Silva is pushing hard for major political packages.
But the negotiation process is extremely contentious, driven by immediate national economic interests.
The urgency on the ground is just undeniable, especially regarding the deforestation roadmap. Current deforestation rates in critical regions like the Amazon are 63% higher than the rate we need to be at to meet the 2030 goal.
And scientists are warning that this essential ecosystem is rapidly nearing an irreversible tipping point,
which would have catastrophic consequences for global climate stability. On the positive side of the ledger, though, Germany made a substantial financial commitment.
They pledged $1 billion, which is about $1.1 billion, over the next decade to the Tropical Forest Forever Facility, or TFFF.
This is a Brazilian-led initiative that uses blended finance. It invests public funds while ensuring that at least 20% of any returns are allocated directly to indigenous peoples and local communities for rainforest protection and sustainable development.
But the negotiations themselves are revealing these deep, intractable rifts.
A major point of contention involves critical minerals, which are essential for clean energy technologies like batteries and solar panels.
And China and Russia are actively pushing back against language in the draft text that outlines the social and environmental risks associated with their extraction.
They're arguing that detailing these risks puts an unnecessary burden on their supply chains and their internal regulatory processes.
At the same time, within the EU, the bloc is struggling for a unified position on a definitive fossil fuel roadmap.
Countries like Italy and Poland are opposing a strong transition plan because of their high reliance on fossil fuels, and petrostates like Saudi Arabia are expressing strong opposition to integrating any definitive roadmap references into the official COP texts.
The conflict is clear. The desire for a comprehensive global framework is colliding directly with national economic dependencies and internal political resistance.
Now, let's look at Topic B, economic indicators and policy headwinds. The oil market is facing a significant structural shift.
The International Energy Agency, the IEA, has warned of a potential global oil surplus developing as early as 2026.
This is generally good news for consumers. Lower prices benefit transport, shipping, flights, pretty much everything globally.
But it affects the strategy of the OPEC Plus coalition.
Right, they're taking a very cautious approach regarding production levels to maintain pricing power. Forecasts suggest supply may begin to match or even exceed demand, which is prompting the group to halt output increases for the first quarter of 2026.
Meanwhile, the U.S. Federal Reserve is experiencing deep internal discord that affects the entire global economy.
The minutes from the Federal Reserve revealed these sharp divisions among policymakers regarding potential rate cuts for October and December.
Ongoing inflation concerns are the dividing line here.
They are. While some members advocate for rate reductions to support economic growth, others fear that cutting rates prematurely would just reignite inflationary pressures, undoing all the previous progress.
This internal conflict, coupled with the delayed September jobs report showing the unemployment rate at a still high 4.4%, has reinforced market expectations against a December rate cut.
The path forward for U.S. monetary policy is highly uncertain and, subject to a lot of internal debate.
And in the United Kingdom, there's a concerning domestic economic indicator about human capital: youth unemployment.
Data from the Office for National Statistics shows that nearly 1 million young people in the UK are currently not in work or education.
That's roughly 1 in 8 young individuals.
It highlights a persistent structural challenge in integrating youth into the workforce and educational systems. It signals a necessary need for more robust intervention strategies to prevent long-term economic stagnation for that demographic.
Moving to Topic C, let's examine corporate and trade vulnerabilities. The U.S. auto industry is reeling from a major supply chain shock.
And it really illustrates the danger of single-point dependency. The Novelis aluminum plant in Oswego, New York,
which supplies critical aluminum components to major automakers like Ford.
It suffered its third major fire in recent months. The disruption is massive because of the specialized nature of the components it provides.
Ford Motor Company, in particular, disclosed that it anticipates a potential impact of up to $2 billion on its quarterly earnings,
specifically affecting production of its highly popular F-150 trucks. This incident just starkly illustrates the vulnerability of just-in-time manufacturing models when they're faced with a catastrophic failure at a single critical supplier.
And we also have the continuing structural trade imbalance involving China and the electric vehicle, or EV, market.
China dominates 70% of the global EV market, yet its vehicles are virtually absent in the U.S. and Canada.
And that absence is purely due to policy. Tariffs exceeding 100%, a significant barrier implemented to protect domestic manufacturers, make Chinese EVs prohibitively expensive in North America.
It often nearly doubles the price. Consequently, North America is lagging significantly behind the global rate of electrification, relying heavily on its own domestic, high-cost EV production.
And finally, reflecting the continued turmoil in China's property market, we're seeing the ripple effects across the globe.
China Evergrande Group's subsidiary defaulted on $58 million in debts, forcing the sale of its iconic Canadian hotel, the Fairmont Le Chateau Montebello in Quebec.
It's a highly symbolic sale that reflects the company's ongoing multi-billion-dollar financial crisis, which began with its massive debt default back in 2021.
From the global economy, we now turn inward, exploring the mysteries of the human body, the deep past, and the future of human identity.
Segment 6, the biology of the self and ancient mysteries. We begin with Topic A, reevaluating health and cognition. First, a major breakthrough in the fight against cancer.
Researchers have developed a groundbreaking method to prevent T cells, the critical components of our immune system that fight cancer, from becoming exhausted.
Which is the major hurdle in long-term immunotherapy success.
This is huge. The research identified specific molecular signals that tumors use to weaken the T cells, essentially making them quit the fight.
And by identifying and interrupting these signals,
they demonstrated they could foster a much more robust and longer-lasting immune response against the tumor. This finding promises to supercharge existing immunotherapies and increase long-term survival rates for certain cancers.
And now for something that challenges our entire concept of self. The fascinating and frankly unsettling phenomenon of personality change in organ transplant recipients.
It sounds like an urban legend, but the anecdotal evidence is compelling enough to warrant serious study. A recent survey found that approximately 89% of transplant recipients reported experiencing some form of change post-surgery.
And we're talking about heart recipients suddenly developing new, intense food cravings that were specific to their donor.
Or adopting new hobbies or musical tastes they never had before.
This raises profound philosophical questions about where memory and identity truly reside. Conventionally, we assume they're solely tied to the brain.
But this suggests a potential cellular memory, or some kind of complex connection between the cellular biology in the donated organ and the recipient's neuropsychology, that is. Well, it's immensely complex and not fully understood by science.
In terms of public health ethics, we have to address the controversy surrounding Nestlé.
A report by the Swiss NGO Public Eye claims Nestlé is violating global nutrition guidelines by selling baby cereals, specifically Cerelac, with high sugar levels in African and other global markets,
while at the same time selling lower sugar or sugar-free versions of the exact same product in Europe.
This double standard has drawn international condemnation, accusing the corporation of prioritizing profit over the nutritional health of vulnerable infants in developing economies.
Nestlé has rejected the most severe allegations, but has stated that no added sugar options will be available in all markets by 2025.
Which is, a response to the public outcry.
And adding to public health confusion, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, their website made a controversial revision of language recently.
It suggested a potential connection between vaccines and autism. This is despite the overwhelming, decades-long scientific consensus that denies any link whatsoever.
This shift in messaging, regardless of the scientific facts, significantly fuels existing tensions around vaccine misinformation.
And it actively complicates crucial public health efforts by damaging institutional trust.
Now we delve into the mysteries of human history with Topic B, Unsolved Human History. Let's talk about the possible survival of the hobbit hominid.
Anthropologist Gregory Forth is arguing that Homo floresiensis, the small 3.5-foot hominid species believed to have gone extinct 50,000 years ago, may still survive into modern times.
On the island of Flores in Indonesia.
He's basing this speculative argument on anecdotal sightings and narratives that he collected from local indigenous populations. He's interpreting these accounts through an anthropological lens as containing potential grains of truth about a hidden species that survived much longer than the archaeological record suggests.
Skeptics remain firm that without definitive physical evidence, a skeleton, a fossil, or a verified live capture, this remains purely speculative.
It does, but it reignites discussions about the definitions of human life and evolution, and whether our understanding of how recently other hominids became extinct is truly complete.
Shifting to a confirmed archaeological discovery. An ornate dagger consistent with Hallstatt culture artistry was found in Central Europe.
This sophisticated weapon dates back to the late Iron Age, around 800 to 500 BC. The intricate decorations on the dagger indicate that it served not only as a functional weapon, but also as a ceremonial or status object.
And this find gives archaeologists valuable insight into the social structures, technological advancements, specifically in metalworking, and the cultural meaning within the Hallstatt culture,
which was highly influential in early European society.
Finally, Topic C brings us back to Justice, Crime, and Psychology. A new book by prosecutor Thien Ho reveals some psychological insight into one of America's most notorious serial killers, Joseph DeAngelo.
Who claims DeAngelo, who is known as the Golden State Killer, was driven by an insatiable appetite for power.
It highlights a chillingly common pattern. The violence was often an expression of the profound powerlessness and inadequacy he felt in his personal life, a desire to restore control through dominance over his victims.
And in Southeast Asia, we see cybercrime intersecting alarmingly with human trafficking. Former Philippines Mayor Alice Guo, who fraudulently posed as a Filipina while secretly being a Chinese national, was sentenced to life in prison.
Guo was convicted for human trafficking and operating a massive scam hub that exploited hundreds of victims, forcing them into various online schemes.
The UN reported that Southeast Asia lost an estimated $37 billion to scammers in 2023. This case just highlights the growing brutality, complexity, and scope of organized cybercrime in the region, which is often rooted in human exploitation.
Lastly, a domestic surveillance debate in the U.S. regarding the Border Patrol.
The U.S. Border Patrol has implemented a highly controversial monitoring program.
This program tracks millions of American drivers using license plate scanners to identify what it categorizes as suspicious travel patterns.
Based on origin, destination, and route proximity to the border. Critics argue that this secretive operation raises major civil liberties concerns and carries a significant risk of racial profiling,
as it disproportionately impacts communities of color traveling within the U.S.
The Border Patrol defends the program as absolutely necessary for immigration enforcement and national security, but the lack of transparency about the algorithms used to define these suspicious patterns is fueling public backlash and demands for immediate critical oversight.
It's another classic tension between national security and foundational rights.
That tension between national security interests and individual privacy, between soaring technological ambition and systemic resource limits, that has defined so much of our discussion today. It stretches from the quantum level all the way to the global geopolitical stage.
Absolutely. We've covered ground that spans the entire global spectrum, from the staggering $31.9 billion profit generated by NVIDIA and the systemic risks that concentration creates,
To the 10 million Kelvin heat generated by a single silica particle, redefining the laws of heat.
We've wrestled with the profound implications of cellular memory and the complex concessions proposed in the name of peace in Ukraine.
You now have the condensed, contextualized knowledge of these critical global subjects. The goal is to move you beyond the simple headlines and equip you with the deep context necessary to truly understand the connections between science, policy, and finance.
So here's the provocative closing thought we want to leave you with. If the future of AI and advanced computing is inextricably tied to resource dominance and these massive energy-intensive data centers,
And yet, scientists have proven that single particles can operate with efficiency under conditions hotter than the sun by leveraging fluctuation effects.
how much do our massive macroscopic energy demands actually limit the true revolutionary and efficient potential of technology at the microscopic or quantum scale?
Perhaps to truly build bigger, faster, and more sustainably, we must first learn to think smaller.
And fundamentally change our relationship with energy efficiency, information, and physics itself.
Food for thought indeed. Thank you for joining us for the deep dive.
We'll see you next time.
Enjoying Artificially Informed.
Hit subscribe and share it with a friend.
From the left, the right, and straight from the algorithm.
Thank you.
That's it for today's Artificially Informed.
Nope. Thanks for spending your time with us.
Yeah.
Stay sharp, stay curious. See you next time.